Have you ever noticed how the moment you defend yourself, you lose the upper hand? The more you argue, the more power slips away. But what if I told you there's a subtle trick used by the world's greatest strategists that lets you flip the power instantly, without raising your voice or fighting back? Today, I'm revealing the secret that transforms weakness into strength. Imagine a situation where someone suddenly attacks you, whether in a meeting, a social gathering, or even online. Their words are sharp, calculated, or sometimes just careless, and instinctively your first reaction might be to defend yourself. Most people believe that defending themselves immediately is the right approach, that the truth alone will vindicate them, and that if they don't speak up, they risk losing respect. But in reality, defending yourself in that moment often amplifies the attacker's power. When you respond in anger or anxiety, your opponent watches carefully, feeding on your reactions, analyzing your weaknesses, and turning every word into leverage against you. The more you try to prove yourself, the more attention you give them, and paradoxically, the stronger they feel. In these critical moments, silence becomes not just a choice, but a shield, a tool for protecting your dignity and subtly shifting the dynamics of power in your favor. Silence allows you to step back, to observe, and to absorb the situation with clarity that is impossible in the heat of emotion. It is not passivity, it is strategic patience. It is choosing to let the storm pass over you while maintaining your composure, knowing that a rash defense would only intensify the confrontation. The power of silence lies in its ability to disarm aggression without confrontation, to create uncertainty in the mind of the attacker, and to open a space where judgment, perception, and truth can work naturally. When you don't respond immediately, the aggressor often begins to reveal themselves through their own words and actions, sometimes exposing inconsistencies, arrogance, or flaws that would otherwise remain hidden if you were to interrupt them with a defensive stance. Silence invites the world to witness the conflict without interference, and in doing so, it subtly signals control. People are drawn to those who remain calm under pressure, those who do not react impulsively, and those who do not allow their emotions to dictate their actions. In the Islamic tradition, patience, dignity, and self-restraint in the face of provocation are repeatedly emphasized. Reacting in anger is discouraged because it often leads to regret, misjudgment, and escalation, whereas measured silence paired with thoughtful action cultivates respect and trust. By remaining silent, you also grant yourself the opportunity to process the situation fully, to understand the intent behind the attack, and to plan a response that is effective and proportionate rather than reactive. In many ways, silence is a shield not only against external attacks but also against internal impulses that could compromise your judgment. It allows you to separate emotion from action, to observe human behavior from a distance, and to see the true dynamics of power at play. When you remain silent, you are in a position of observation rather than reaction. You notice the micro-expressions, the tone shifts, the subtle cues that reveal the aggressor's state of mind and strategy. You begin to understand not just what is being said, but why it is being said, and this understanding is far more valuable than the temporary satisfaction of defending yourself. The attack may be personal, professional, or even public, but the principle remains the same. The immediate urge to argue, to clarify, to defend, often creates more chaos than resolution. When you resist that urge and choose silence, you effectively take the power away from the aggressor by refusing to feed the narrative they are trying to construct. Instead of giving them ammunition in the form of your reaction, you let their actions and words stand on their own, exposing their true character to anyone observing. This strategy is subtle and often invisible to the aggressor, who may believe they have succeeded in provoking you, while in reality, the balance of influence has quietly shifted. The observer effect plays a significant role here. Those around the interaction notice the calm, composed individual in contrast to the aggressive, reactive one. Without saying a word, your silence communicates strength, restraint, and intelligence. It is a demonstration of confidence that your value is not dependent on defending it verbally. The human mind often associates immediate defense with insecurity, with vulnerability, and even with guilt. By remaining silent, you deny the attacker that perception, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable reality that you are unshaken, unaffected, and in control of yourself. Silence also allows time for the context to clarify itself. Often, in moments of attack, emotions are heightened, assumptions are made, and judgments are clouded. By waiting, you allow the situation to unfold, revealing truths that may have been obscured by the immediacy of the confrontation. People who rush to defend themselves frequently miss these nuances, while those who employ silence gain perspective that informs wiser decisions. There is also a psychological component in which silence creates tension, curiosity, and uncertainty in the mind of the aggressor. Humans are conditioned to expect responses, especially when provoked, and when that expected response is withheld, it can unsettle the attacker. They may begin to question themselves, second-guess their motives, and even overexpose their intentions in their continued attempts to provoke. Silence in this sense is not passive, it is active strategy. It allows you to steer the situation indirectly without overtly taking control, to let the aggressor reveal themselves while you remain observant, and to act decisively when the right moment arises. Practical terms, this can be applied in countless situations. A tense work meeting where a colleague undermines your idea, a social encounter where someone spreads a rumor about you, or even in personal relationships where confrontation escalates emotions. In each case, silence functions as a protective shield, giving you time to assess, plan, and respond with intention. Moreover, the act of remaining silent teaches emotional mastery. It is easy to react with words, with defensiveness, and with anger. It is far more difficult to restrain oneself, to control the instinct to justify, explain, or argue. That restraint builds inner power, cultivates respect from others, and strengthens your sense of self. In the long term, those who master the art of silence often find that conflicts resolve more favorably, reputations are preserved, and relationships maintain dignity. Silence, therefore, is both a shield and a tool, a defensive and offensive strategy combined. It protects you in the moment, it allows insight into the aggressor's strategy, and it positions you to respond with precision when necessary. It embodies patience, wisdom, and self-control, qualities that are admired universally across cultures and reinforced in Islamic teachings as virtues of character. In choosing silence, you are not conceding. You are observing, calculating, and preparing. You are effectively flipping the power dynamic by refusing to play into the aggressor's hands. The immediate satisfaction of defending yourself is exchanged for a far greater advantage: clarity, authority, and respect. Even a simple pause, a measured breath, or a quiet acknowledgement without argument can communicate more strength than 1,000 words of defense. And as the situation unfolds, as the true intentions of others come to light, those who remain silent often find themselves in a position of moral and strategic advantage, able to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and in doing so, influence outcomes in ways that words alone could never achieve. Imagine being in a situation where every instinct inside you screams to react, to prove yourself, to defend your honor, your ideas, or your decisions. Maybe someone has belittled your work in front of others, questioned your integrity, or tried to humiliate you publicly. The natural response is to strike back verbally, to explain, to justify, to correct every detail, because your ego tells you that if you don't, you will appear weak. But true strength lies in resisting that impulse, in understanding that the desire to react immediately is often less about the truth and more about your pride and ego. When we act from ego, we may feel momentarily satisfied, but more often we feed the aggression, we escalate conflict, and we lose control over the situation. Patience, on the other hand, is not passivity. It is an intentional, conscious decision to step back, to pause, to let the immediate tension flow past you, and to choose a measured response that serves long-term goals instead of short-term gratification. In many ways, the difference between ego-driven reactions and patient strategy is the difference between chaos and clarity. The ego wants to be right instantly. It craves the audience's approval, the validation of the moment, and the satisfaction of immediate revenge or defense. Patience does not deny the situation. It observes, analyzes, and waits for the optimal moment to act. It recognizes that responding in haste may satisfy pride temporarily but rarely achieves the desired outcome. Consider a workplace scenario. A colleague publicly challenges your idea, questioning your competence in front of your team. The instinct is to argue, to point out their errors, to defend yourself. But when you pause, take a deep breath, and resist the immediate urge to retaliate, something subtle yet powerful happens. Others begin to notice your calm. They notice that you are not rattled, that your composure is steady, and that your focus remains on the bigger picture rather than personal disputes. Your patience becomes a visible sign of strength, and in that moment your credibility grows. You do not need to shout to assert authority. Your quiet restraint communicates it naturally. Patience also allows you to see the situation more clearly. When the ego dominates, judgment is clouded, emotions run high, and details are overlooked. In contrast, patience creates mental space to analyze motives, observe behaviors, and understand the dynamics at play. You can assess who is reacting out of malice, who is insecure, and who is simply mistaken. By holding back your immediate reaction, you gain insight that those who act impulsively rarely achieve. In Islam, patience is not just a virtue, it is a guiding principle in human conduct. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, emphasized patience in the face of adversity, instructing believers that restraint in response to provocation preserves dignity, strengthens character, and often results in more favorable outcomes than rash action. Applying this principle in everyday life does not mean tolerating injustice indefinitely, but rather choosing to respond with wisdom, measured judgment, and moral authority rather than emotional impulsiveness. When you master patience, you also protect your relationships, your reputation, and your inner peace. Acting from ego often alienates people, creates unnecessary tension, and can escalate conflicts beyond repair. Patience, in contrast, allows time for reflection, for empathy, and for understanding. It gives you the ability to respond not with anger, but with insight, not with defensiveness, but with clarity, and not with impulsive words, but with actions that carry weight and meaning. There is also a subtle power in letting others' behavior reveal itself over time. Those who act aggressively or arrogantly often expose their true character when left unchecked. By exercising patience, you allow the situation to unfold, revealing motives, inconsistencies, and weaknesses that are invisible in the heat of immediate confrontation. The ego, in its urgency, seeks to win the battle now, but patience teaches you to play the long game, to wait for the right moment when your influence is maximized and your response carries undeniable authority. Patience is also deeply connected to emotional intelligence. It is the ability to recognize your own emotional triggers, to understand the pressures and provocations of others, and to manage both in a way that serves constructive outcomes. Those who lack patience often allow their emotions to dominate, responding in ways that satisfy temporary pride but damage long-term objectives. The patient individual, however, uses restraint as a strategic tool, a way to maintain control over the narrative, and a way to preserve integrity in every action. Consider a situation in a personal relationship. Someone says something hurtful, accusatory, or even false. The first instinct might be to retaliate, to correct, or to justify yourself immediately. But the person who exercises patience waits, listens, and reflects before speaking. They do not allow words to control their emotions. Instead, they choose the timing, tone, and content of their response carefully. In doing so, they maintain their dignity, demonstrate maturity, and often guide the conversation toward a constructive resolution that would have been impossible through impulsive defense. Patience over ego also protects mental energy. Defending oneself constantly, reacting to every slight or criticism, drains focus, creates stress, and fuels resentment. By exercising patience, you conserve energy, maintain mental clarity, and channel your efforts toward actions that are impactful and meaningful rather than reactive and draining. The moral authority that comes from patience is often more enduring than the temporary satisfaction of ego-driven defense. People respect those who control themselves, who act from principle rather than emotion, and who prioritize wisdom over pride. When you consistently respond with patience, you cultivate a reputation for strength, composure, and fairness. This is a form of power that ego-driven reactions rarely achieve, because it is grounded in perception, respect, and credibility rather than immediate gratification. Patience also allows for strategic timing. By waiting, observing, and reflecting, you can choose the precise moment to respond in a way that maximizes influence and minimizes unnecessary conflict. You can address the issue with calm authority, propose solutions thoughtfully, and demonstrate leadership without aggression. This approach often surprises those who expect immediate retaliation, causing them to rethink their assumptions and respect your composure. Ultimately, patience over ego is about prioritizing long-term outcomes over short-term satisfaction. It is the conscious decision to value wisdom, dignity, and clarity above the need to be immediately right, to win a verbal battle, or to defend pride. It requires self-awareness, emotional control, and a deep understanding of human behavior. By exercising patience, you not only protect yourself in the moment but also position yourself to achieve greater influence, stronger relationships, and more sustainable results. The strength of patience is invisible at first glance, but its effects ripple through interactions, earning trust, respect, and authority. It is a shield against impulsive mistakes, a guide for thoughtful action, and a principle that transforms challenges into opportunities for demonstrating integrity, wisdom, and control. Imagine a situation where someone publicly challenges you, questions your abilities, or even spreads rumors about you. Your first instinct might be to respond immediately with words, to defend yourself, to explain, to clarify, to argue your side. It feels natural to believe that if you explain everything, if you justify your actions, or if you correct the misunderstandings, the situation will resolve in your favor. But words, no matter how carefully chosen, are fleeting. They can be misinterpreted, dismissed, or twisted. They can inflame tempers, intensify conflict, or inadvertently reveal vulnerabilities. Actions, on the other hand, carry a weight that words cannot match. They are the living proof of your character, competence, and integrity. When you focus on what you do rather than what you say, you communicate strength, clarity, and credibility without engaging in unnecessary battles. Consider a workplace scenario. A colleague publicly undermines your contribution during a team meeting. The room grows tense, and eyes are on you, waiting for your reaction. The easy path is to defend yourself verbally, to point out why your work was correct, to justify every decision. The instinct of ego tells you that if you don't speak, you will be seen as weak or incompetent. But instead, you choose to stay calm, to observe, and to focus on your next steps. You continue delivering your work with precision, professionalism, and integrity. Over time, the results speak for themselves. Your consistent actions, reliability, and quality of work begin to shift the perception of your peers. The person who attacked you may initially have felt in control, but as your actions consistently demonstrate competence and integrity, the power subtly shifts. Others begin to notice that the evidence of your abilities outweighs the noise of arguments. This principle is not limited to professional settings. It applies to every area of life. In personal relationships, in friendships, in leadership, and in public life, people are drawn to those whose actions align with their words. They trust what they see more than what they hear. Someone who constantly talks about values, honesty, and competence but fails to act accordingly loses influence. Conversely, someone who quietly embodies these principles earns respect, admiration, and authority without needing to prove themselves verbally. This is particularly important in high-stakes situations where emotions run high and words alone are insufficient. The Islamic tradition emphasizes the power of action as well. A person's deeds are considered more reflective of their character than their words. Integrity, humility, patience, and wisdom are demonstrated through behavior, not slogans or defenses. Acting in accordance with moral principles, even under pressure or provocation, communicates authenticity, reinforces credibility, and preserves dignity. There is also a psychological dimension to this approach. When someone attacks you and you respond only with words, you are engaging in a battle of perception, where the outcome depends on how others interpret your explanation or defense. Words can be twisted, ignored, or dismissed. Actions, however, provide objective evidence. Consistency, reliability, and visible competence are difficult to dispute. They leave a lasting impression and gradually shift perceptions more effectively than any verbal argument could. Consider a scenario where a project you led encounters criticism. A peer may highlight flaws or mistakes publicly. Responding defensively could escalate tension and make you appear reactive. Instead, by focusing on correcting the issues, improving the project, and producing tangible results, you demonstrate accountability and capability. Over time, your actions create a narrative of competence and responsibility that surpasses any verbal defense. People start seeing the truth not because you explained it, but because they witnessed it unfold. Furthermore, actions often carry an emotional resonance that words cannot. A calm, composed person who continues to act responsibly under pressure inspires trust, confidence, and loyalty. Others are more likely to follow, respect, and support someone who proves themselves through deeds rather than debates. The silent authority of action can disarm critics, calm tense situations, and even encourage adversaries to reconsider their approach. It creates a subtle yet undeniable shift in the dynamics of influence and power. In conflict situations, focusing on actions rather than words also prevents the escalation of disputes. Defensive arguments can provoke further attacks, intensify hostility, and obscure the core issues. Acting with integrity, consistency, and patience allows the truth to emerge naturally, reduces unnecessary friction, and fosters resolution. By demonstrating through behavior that you are principled, competent, and composed, you communicate far more effectively than through any immediate verbal defense. Actions also have a cumulative effect. While words fade, repeated behaviors build a track record that others recognize, respect, and rely upon. Over time, this track record becomes a shield and a source of influence. When others attack or question you in the future, they encounter not just your words but a history of integrity and competence that speaks louder than any argument. In personal growth and self-development, the principle of actions over words is transformative. It shifts the focus from external validation to intrinsic consistency. You are no longer dependent on defending yourself constantly. Instead, you let your behavior, achievements, and character demonstrate who you are. This approach fosters confidence, self-respect, and inner peace because you are grounded in reality and in your own principles rather than in the fleeting judgments or perceptions of others. Another crucial aspect of this principle is timing. Words are immediate, actions unfold over time. By choosing to act instead of defending verbally, you allow situations to reveal themselves naturally. Mistakes, misjudgments, or flaws in the aggressor's position become apparent, and the truth emerges without direct confrontation. This strategy also prevents you from being drawn into unnecessary conflicts that drain energy and focus. When you act instead of arguing, you maintain control of your narrative, your priorities, and your resources. Silence paired with deliberate action conveys power in a way that words alone cannot. Others perceive you as composed, thoughtful, and competent. Your credibility grows because it is backed by tangible results rather than empty claims or defensive rhetoric. This approach cultivates influence without aggression, authority without intimidation, and respect without confrontation. Even when facing repeated attacks or provocations, focusing on actions allows you to maintain dignity and strategic advantage. The attacker may believe they are in control, but as your consistent behavior demonstrates reliability, competence, and composure, their attempts to undermine you lose effectiveness. Observers, colleagues, friends, or audiences begin to align their perceptions with the reality demonstrated by your deeds, not the narrative attempted by your aggressor. In essence, the principle of actions speak louder than words teaches us that influence and authority are earned through what we do, not what we say. Words can clarify, explain, or inspire, but without consistent actions to support them, they are often ignored or doubted. Actions are visible proof of integrity, competence, and wisdom. They shift power subtly, build lasting credibility, and inspire trust in a way that words alone rarely can. By focusing on what you do, maintaining composure, and letting your results and behavior speak for themselves, you create a powerful, enduring influence that no immediate defense or argument can achieve. Imagine a moment when someone challenges you, criticizes you, or tries to assert control over you. The instinct is to respond immediately, to defend yourself, to prove your point, to reclaim the balance of power. Yet the truth is that reacting too quickly often hands the power to the other person. Strategic timing is the secret that transforms such situations. It is the subtle art of waiting, observing, and choosing the precise moment to act so that your influence is maximized and your response has undeniable impact. Timing is not just about patience. It is about awareness, perception, and control. It is the difference between reacting impulsively and responding wisely. When you master timing, you no longer allow others to dictate the pace of your reactions. Instead, you create a rhythm that aligns with your objectives and your principles, guiding situations toward outcomes that benefit you and uphold your integrity. Consider a scenario in a workplace. A colleague publicly questions your work, undermining your credibility in front of the team. The natural urge is to defend yourself immediately, to clarify, to explain, or even to confront the person directly. However, responding impulsively may escalate tension, provoke further attacks, or distort the perception of your composure. By observing the situation and waiting for the right moment to respond, whether through your work, a carefully chosen conversation, or a demonstration of competence, you allow the dynamics to shift in your favor. The aggressor may reveal weaknesses, inconsistencies, or gaps in their behavior that would otherwise remain hidden if you had responded too quickly. Strategic timing also allows for clarity in judgment. When we react immediately, emotions often cloud perception. Anger, fear, or frustration can distort reality, leading to responses that are ineffective or even damaging. By delaying your response and choosing the moment carefully, you gain mental clarity, see the situation more objectively, and plan your actions in a way that achieves the desired outcome without unnecessary conflict. Timing gives you control over the narrative. When someone attacks you, the aggressor often attempts to frame the situation, shaping how others perceive you and influencing decisions in their favor. Reacting instantly may play into their hands, allowing them to dictate the story. By waiting and responding strategically, you reclaim control, positioning yourself to influence perceptions through thoughtful actions and well-timed communication. There is also a psychological advantage to strategic timing. Human beings expect immediate responses. When you withhold your reaction and choose the right moment to act, it creates uncertainty in the mind of the aggressor. They may begin to second-guess their strategy, overcompensate, or reveal more than they intended. This subtle shift in the dynamics of power can be decisive, allowing you to address the situation from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. In Islamic teachings, strategic timing is reflected in the principles of patience, wisdom, and measured action. Reacting impulsively to provocation is discouraged, while careful observation, thoughtful planning, and choosing the right moment to act are highly valued. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, often emphasized deliberation, timing, and thoughtful action in moments of conflict or challenge, demonstrating that true influence is achieved not through rash words but through calculated, principled behavior. Strategic timing is not about passivity or inaction. It is about active observation and mindful preparation. It involves recognizing when to speak, when to act, and when to wait so that every move contributes to your long-term objectives. By allowing situations to unfold, you gather essential information about the aggressor, the environment, and the perceptions of others, enabling you to respond with precision and impact. Consider personal relationships. Someone might say something hurtful, accusatory, or provocative. Reacting immediately may escalate the conflict and strain the relationship. By pausing, reflecting, and choosing the right moment to respond, whether through calm communication, thoughtful action, or silence, you maintain dignity, preserve respect, and achieve a resolution that aligns with your values. Timing allows you to transform moments of vulnerability into opportunities for influence and authority. When you respond too soon, you risk undermining yourself or appearing reactive. When you respond strategically, you create leverage, demonstrate wisdom, and shift the power dynamic subtly but decisively. This principle applies in leadership, negotiations, friendships, and professional environments. Leaders who understand strategic timing know when to intervene, when to delegate, and when to let situations develop. They recognize that influence is amplified when action is measured, purposeful, and aligned with the natural flow of events. Timing also interacts with the perception of credibility. People respect those who act with thoughtfulness and discernment. Immediate reactions are often associated with emotionality, impulsiveness, or insecurity. By responding at the right moment, you signal control, authority, and insight, demonstrating that your actions are deliberate and guided by principle rather than reaction. Another essential aspect of strategic timing is the ability to anticipate outcomes. By observing, listening, and waiting, you can predict how situations will evolve, allowing you to intervene at the moment that maximizes effectiveness. This foresight transforms reactive situations into proactive opportunities, positioning you as a person of influence who is always prepared rather than constantly defending. In many cases, the act of waiting and choosing the right moment exposes the true intentions of others. Aggressors or critics often overextend themselves, reveal flaws in their arguments, or display behavior that undermines their position when not met with immediate confrontation. By exercising timing, you allow their actions to speak for themselves, strengthening your position without the need for verbal defense. Strategic timing also fosters emotional resilience. By delaying reactions, you create a buffer that protects your emotional state, reduces impulsive decisions, and preserves mental clarity. You can assess the long-term consequences of your actions, choose responses that align with your values, and act in ways that maintain integrity while maximizing impact. In essence, mastering strategic timing flips the conventional understanding of power. Rather than reacting to others' moves, you set the pace and create the conditions under which your response will have the greatest effect. You transform moments of potential vulnerability into opportunities for influence, authority, and respect. Timing becomes a silent tool that communicates strength, patience, and foresight. The subtlety of timing often goes unnoticed by observers and aggressors, but its impact is profound. By responding deliberately, you demonstrate mastery over yourself, over the situation, and over the perceptions of others. Your actions carry weight precisely because they are measured, well-timed, and intentional, rather than reactive or impulsive. Even when facing repeated provocations, strategic timing ensures that your responses maintain credibility, moral authority, and effectiveness. Over time, this approach builds a reputation of composure, insight, and influence, as others recognize that you act thoughtfully and decisively rather than reactively. Finally, strategic timing teaches a critical life lesson. Power is not always about action in the moment, but about understanding the flow of events and acting at the moment that maximizes impact, preserves dignity, and aligns with your long-term objectives. By observing, analyzing, and waiting for the precise moment to respond, you flip the dynamics of power in subtle but undeniable ways, demonstrating that patience, foresight, and measured action are far more powerful than immediate reaction. Imagine a situation where someone challenges you, questions your decisions, or tries to assert dominance over you. The instinct in most people is to defend themselves, to argue, or even to retaliate. In that moment, the focus often shifts from what is right to how to prove oneself, and the ego becomes the driver of action. Yet there is a far deeper and more enduring source of power than words, anger, or immediate retaliation, and that is moral and ethical authority. This is the authority that comes not from asserting dominance or winning an argument, but from acting with integrity, adhering to principles, and consistently choosing what is just and honorable, even when it is difficult. Moral authority is quiet but profound. It does not demand attention. It earns respect over time. When people observe someone who consistently acts ethically, who treats others with fairness, and who maintains composure in the face of provocation, they naturally gravitate toward that person, trust them, and recognize their influence. This kind of authority is unshakable because it is grounded in principles rather than circumstance. Consider a workplace example. Imagine a manager who is criticized by a colleague during a team meeting. The colleague may attempt to undermine the manager's credibility or manipulate perceptions in their favor. A person acting purely from ego might respond defensively, counterattacking verbally or trying to expose the other's flaws. But a person grounded in moral authority approaches the situation differently. They remain calm, listen carefully, and respond with fairness, focusing on facts and solutions rather than personal attacks. Their behavior communicates a deeper strength, one that cannot be easily challenged or provoked. This approach not only diffuses tension, but also elevates the observer's perception of the individual as trustworthy, wise, and principled. Moral authority is particularly powerful because it transcends immediate circumstances. While arguments, defenses, and reactive behaviors may win temporary victories, they rarely leave a lasting impression. Ethical action, however, has a cumulative effect. Every choice made in alignment with integrity builds credibility. Every decision guided by fairness reinforces respect. Over time, a person known for moral authority commands influence naturally, without having to assert it through force, intimidation, or defensiveness. In personal relationships, this principle is equally impactful. Imagine being confronted with gossip, false accusations, or hurtful behavior. Immediate defense often leads to escalation, resentment, or broken trust. Choosing to act with integrity, however, whether by responding with truth calmly, maintaining composure, or addressing the issue thoughtfully, demonstrates that your values are not dictated by others' attacks. You communicate that your character is consistent, principled, and reliable, and this inspires respect even from those who initially sought to challenge or provoke you. In Islamic teachings, moral and ethical authority is deeply emphasized. Integrity, fairness, humility, and patience are core values, and responding to adversity with these qualities is seen as a sign of strength, wisdom, and closeness to God. Acting with ethical authority does not mean passivity. It means making conscious, principled choices that prioritize what is just, truthful, and right over personal pride, instant gratification, or reactive impulse. Another dimension of moral authority is its ability to transform conflict into understanding. When someone attacks or provokes you, responding ethically and morally often causes the aggressor and observers to reconsider their assumptions. The consistent demonstration of fairness and integrity creates a contrast with aggression, dishonesty, or rashness. It becomes clear who is acting from principle and who is driven by ego. Over time, this contrast not only resolves conflicts more effectively, but also establishes a lasting reputation of credibility and trustworthiness. Moral authority is also strategic in the way it shifts power subtly but decisively. Unlike immediate defense or confrontation, which can escalate conflict and entangle you in reactive battles, ethical action creates an indirect influence. Others notice the consistency of your behavior, the alignment between your words and actions, and the composure you maintain under pressure. This quiet demonstration of strength often produces greater results than any argument could, because it works at the level of perception, respect, and long-term influence. Consider leadership situations. Leaders who act with moral and ethical authority inspire loyalty and cooperation not through fear, intimidation, or constant assertion of dominance, but through trust, fairness, and consistency. Team members are more likely to follow, respect, and support a leader who demonstrates integrity, patience, and wisdom, even in challenging circumstances. Their authority is reinforced not by immediate victories in disputes, but by the steady reliability of their actions over time. The psychological impact of moral authority cannot be overstated. Human beings are wired to respond to fairness, justice, and consistent integrity. Those who act ethically and uphold principles naturally command attention, respect, and influence. Even when facing opposition or aggression, their measured, principled responses create credibility that cannot easily be challenged. Observers often align themselves with individuals who exhibit moral authority because it represents stability, fairness, and reliability, qualities that everyone seeks in moments of uncertainty or conflict. Moral and ethical authority is also inherently resilient. Situations, people, and circumstances constantly change, but principles endure. When your authority is grounded in values rather than reaction, it remains consistent regardless of the challenges you face. This consistency fosters trust, builds influence, and ensures that your position is secure even when external circumstances are volatile. Practically speaking, exercising moral authority means prioritizing ethics over expedience, integrity over personal pride, and principle over temporary advantage. It means choosing to respond with fairness rather than retaliation, to communicate truth rather than defensiveness, and to act consistently rather than impulsively. Each choice reinforces your credibility and strengthens your influence in ways that words alone cannot achieve. Furthermore, moral authority empowers you internally. When you act from principle, you maintain a sense of self-respect, dignity, and clarity of purpose. You are not controlled by the provocations, judgments, or expectations of others. Instead, you act in alignment with your values, and this internal strength becomes visible externally, inspiring trust and admiration. In high-pressure situations, moral authority also creates space for strategic influence. By demonstrating integrity, fairness, and ethical action, you create opportunities to guide outcomes, resolve conflicts, and influence decisions without resorting to aggressive or reactive behavior. Others recognize that your influence is principled rather than self-serving, and this recognition amplifies your authority in subtle but enduring ways. Ultimately, moral and ethical authority wins because it transcends the immediate struggle. While reactive defense and ego-driven responses may provide temporary satisfaction, they rarely produce lasting respect or influence. Acting with integrity, patience, and fairness establishes a foundation of credibility, trust, and moral weight that cannot be easily challenged. It is a source of power that is quiet, consistent, and profoundly effective, demonstrating that true authority is earned through principled action rather than asserted through reaction or argument. By prioritizing moral authority, you cultivate a presence that commands respect, fosters trust, and guides outcomes positively, showing that long-term influence and dignity are far more valuable than short-term victories or reactive defense. Disclaimer: this video is meant for educational and motivational purposes only. The content is designed to share practical wisdom about patience, composure, and strategic thinking. It is not intended to encourage manipulation, harm, or unethical behavior. Always act with integrity, respect, and within the bounds of law and morality.